A pleasant day to each and everyone. We're here to discuss our assigned topic entitled Implementing a Curriculum Daily in Classrooms. But before that, let me introduce to you the three desired learning outcomes. First, review the components of the daily plan for teaching. Second, identify the intended learning outcomes. Lastly, match learning outcomes with appropriate teaching methods. So, a teaching activity is like implementing a minuscule curriculum. A daily lesson plan is based on a planned or written curriculum, which will be put to action by the teacher in the classroom. Before the lesson ends, the teacher must find out if the students have truly learned. So, when we talk about minuscule curriculum, ito ay yung mga lesson plan or mga strategic reference na ini-implement ng isang teacher sa isang classroom na nakabase sa written curriculum na nanggaling o ibinigay ng DepEd. As a connection, it is very essential for us as a teacher due to the fact that it is the way to determine what the students will learn, how the lesson will be taught, as well as how learning will be evaluated. And as we go through the next slide, we have a good news. So it is the DepEd Order number 70 series of 2012. Teacher of all public elementary and secondary schools will not be required to prepare detailed lesson plans that may adopt daily lesson logs which contain the needed information and guide from the teacher guide and teacher manual. Reference materials with page number, intervention given to the students and remarks to indicate how many students have mastered the lesson or are needing remediation. So, ano yung lesson logs? So, it is a template the teacher utilized to log parts of the lesson plans. And it covers the days or weeks worthwhile of lesson. As a connection, it enables us as a teacher to evaluate the students' individual performances. It's either sila ay nabilong sa mastery class or sa remediation class. However, teacher with less than 2 years of teaching experience shall be required to prepare daily lesson plans. So, bakit naman required sa mga bagong teacher na gumawa ng lesson plan? Dahil nga ito ay nagsiserve as a practice or training nila for them to manage and organize the lessons, as well as it enables them to enhance their lesson planning skills. At ito ngang objectives, subject matter, procedure, assessment, and assignment serve as their guide to make a well-constructed lesson plan, at iisa-isahin natin kung ano ang mga mahahalagang nakapaloob dito. So these are the main parts of lesson plan. First is the objectives or the intended learning outcomes or ILO. Second is the subject matter, SM. Next is the procedure or strategies of teaching. And then, the assessment of learning outcomes or ALO. And lastly, assignment of agreement. The first part of lesson plan is the intended learning outcomes or ILO. These are the desired learning that will be the focus of the lesson. So, itong ILO or intended learning outcomes ay yung mga inaasahang matututunan ng mga estudyante after ng discussion. So, learning outcomes are based on taxonomy of objectives presented to us as cognitive, which means it deals with the mental skills, and then the affective, which deals on how we cope up in the situation, and the psychomotor, which deals with the physical coordination or the movements. So we have here the table, which is the Bloom's Taxonomy of 1956 and the revised Bloom's Taxonomy of 2001 na revise ng mismo estudyante ni Bloom na sina Lauren Anderson and David Krathwohl. So let's find out the difference. As we can see, there are three changes between the Bloom's Taxonomy and the revised Bloom's Taxonomy. So, una is yung noun na ginawa ni Bloom ay naging verb sa revise, which is more active form of thinking. And then yung pangalawa ay na-rearrange yung categories. Example is yung evaluating ay napunta doon sa panglima, instead na siya yung highest order of thinking skills. And then yung pangatlo, na-establish yung level ng knowledge from original version, instead na evaluating yung highest order of thinking skills ay naging creating. So now we will move on to the next slide and let's discuss the revised version from LOTS or lower order thinking skills to HOTS, which is the higher order thinking skills. So the first higher order thinking skills is remembering. So remembering means recall or retrieve the previous learned information. Example of keywords are defines, describes, identifies, labels, lists, outlines, selects, and states. The next one is the understanding, which means to comprehend the meaning, translation, state problem in own words, making meaning. So examples of keywords are comprehends, explains, distinguish, estimates, gives examples, interprets, predicts, and rewrites. The next one is applying, which means to use concept in a new situation. Examples of keywords are applies, changes, computes, operates, constructs, modifies, uses, manipulates, prepares, shows, and solves. Next one is the analyzing, which means to separate materials or concept into component parts so that the organization is clear. Examples of keywords are breakdown, compares, contrast, diagrams, differentiates, discriminates, identifies, infers, outlines, relates, selects, and separates. And then the evaluating, which means to make judgment about the value of ideas or materials. So the example keywords are appraises, compares, criticizes, defends, describes, discriminates, identifies, infers, outlines, relates, selects, and separates. The last one is creating, which means to build a structure or pattern from various elements. Examples of keywords are composes, compiles, designs, generates, modifies, organizes, rearranges, reorganizes, revises, and rewrites. So we have here the 4 levels of knowledge. First is the factual knowledge, which means it is the knowledge of specific factual items of information without memory of when each fact was learned. Examples of these are terminologies, glossaries, details, and necessary building details of any professional domain. The second one is the conceptual knowledge, which mean words or ideas known by common name, common features, multiple specific example, which may either be concrete or abstract. The third one is the procedural knowledge. So it emphasizes how things work, step-by-step action, methods of inquiry. So the procedural knowledge is knowing how to do something. Think of the word procedural. Its root is procedure, which is an action. Examples of procedural knowledge are how to drive a car and how to throw a boomerang correctly. The last one is the metacognitive knowledge. It is the knowledge of cognition in general, awareness of knowledge of one's own cognition, or thinking about thinking. So, in short, metacognitive knowledge refer to what learners know about learning. Examples are planning how to approach a learning task using appropriate skills and strategies to solve a problem. So, in writing intended learning outcomes, it should be in a smart way. So, S is for specific. So, kailangan i-eradicate natin ang broad topics para hindi maguluhan ang ating mga learners. And then, the M is for measurable. So, we make sure that yung learning outcomes ay mami-measure through quantitative by using evaluation instruments para malaman kung may natutunan ba yung mga learners. The next one is letter A. A is for attainable. When making ang activities, it must be reached and not too difficult to achieve. And then, the result-oriented. So, kailangan naman ang lesson na diniscuss ay iikot lamang sa binigay na objectives. And the last one is the letter T. T is for time bound. So, kailangan alam natin ng time frame kung gaano katagal yung kinukonsume sa isang discussion or yung allotted time.
There are many ways of teaching for the different kinds of learners. Corpus and Salandanan in 2013 enumerated the following approaches and methods which may be useful for the different kinds of learners. Some are time-tested methods while our others are non-conventional constructivist methods. Number 1, direct demonstration methods to be guided by guided exploratory, discover approach, inquiry method, problem-based learning or PBL, and project method. So meaning, it is use of visual aids, PowerPoint, and teaching in a step-by-step process. Number 2, cooperative learning approaches like pair tutoring, learning action cells, think, pair, share. So, it involves pupil working together on activities. The pupils will share their different ideas and opinion and gather it to a whole output of the group. Number 3, deductive or inductive approaches like project method, inquiry-based learning. So, this inductive teaching is more on a student-centered. Students need to learn new things and gain knowledge by themselves. Examples, give students an activity and don't tell them what they will learn. Let them proceed the activity and later on, they will recognize the learning outcomes. So from the deductive learning approach is more on teacher-centered. This is a method that only teacher are speaking and students are listening. So teacher teach everything and give some quiz to the students. Number 4, other approaches like blended learning, reflective teaching, integrated learning, and outcomes-based approach. So from the blended learning, it is a system of learning is used with or without attending school. Students have different learning styles. There are many classifications of learning styles according to the different authors. The multiple intelligence theory of Howard Gardner implies several learning styles, but for our lessons, we will focus on the 3 learning styles, which are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. These 3 preferred style can help teachers choose method and materials they will use. So from the common characteristics, first, visual. Visual uses graphs, charts, pictures, tends to remember things that are written in form. So from the visual, it is visual aids, PowerPoint, educational video. For auditory, recalls information through hearing and speaking. Prefers to be told how to do things orally or learns aloud. So teachers give lesson by speaking and hearing songs. So the lastly is the kinesthetic. It is prefers hands-on approach, demonstrate how to do rather than explain, like group work with hands-on mind-ons. So it is teaching sports, dance, or good actions. There are tips for teachers about learners. So for example, in visual, it is store notes into pictures, diagrams, maps, and learn the big pictures first than details. Make mind maps and concept maps. So from the auditory, um, record lectures and listen to this. Repeat materials out loud or like parrots. Read aloud. Okay. From the kinesthetic, it is learn something while doing another things like eats while studying, work while standing like field work, do many things at one time. Next, what is meant by instructional materials? So, instructional materials are those materials used by teachers to simplify their teaching. They include both visuals and audiovisuals aids and could either be concrete or non-concrete. These instructional materials bring life to learning by stimulating students to learn. So, these instructional materials are used by teachers to simplify their teaching. Okay, second, instructional materials should complement visuals, auditory, and tactile or combinations of three. Examples of visuals are PowerPoint, visual aids, educational video. For auditory, listening the radio instrument, and the last tactile example, passing the ball and use puppet. In a cone of learning, the picture shows from the passive, it is a verbal receiving. It is show that 10 to 50% learning rate to a student in the class are active. So, from the active, 70% to 90% learning rate to a student by perceiving, participating, doing. Methods and materials must implement the plan taking actions. Example number 1, lesson using basic steps and parts are as prescribed by the PED Order 70s, 2012 for teacher, 2 years and less in service. In this lesson plan will show the basic component of any plan. This can be applied to any subject that follows a generic format. The PED Order 70s 2012 for teacher has 2 years and less in service. Always preparing instructional aids, assisting learners like portfolio, conducting learning interventions. Lesson plan in science, number 1, objective intended learning outcomes. So 1, tell the force is applied to move objects. Number 2, describe that pushing or pulling with a force moves objects. Number 3, state that if force moves the object away from the person, it is a push. Number 4, state that if the force moves the object towards the person and it is a pull. Okay. From this objective learning outcomes, it is activities with brief and clear instructions. Subject matter, number 2. A, topic, pushing and pulling moves object. B, reference, Bilbao P 2020, exploring science with fun. C, science concept. Number 1, object moves when force is applied to it. Number 2, a push is a force that moves objects away. Number 3, a pull is a force that moves the object near. D. Science processes observing, inferring, making operational definitions. E. Materials real objects like chairs, tables, books, stones, big boxes, and pictures. So this subject matter includes a source of informations or references. Number 3, procedure. A. Preparatory activity. 1. Review of prior learning past lesson. B. Lesson proper. 1. Motivation. 1.1. Bring children to observe outside the classroom to identify things or objects that are moving. 1.2. Ask the children to report their observation in the class. 2. Pre-laboratory activities. 2.1. Let the learners recall the standard during a laboratory activity. 2.2. Present all materials needed. 2.3. Distribute activity sheet to each group. Number 3. Laboratory activity 3.1. Using the activity to guide each group work cooperatively. 3.2. Activity 1. Force, can it push or pull? 3.3. Each group records observation for exhibit and reporting. So in short, procedure, step-by-step instruction for the students from the start of the class until the end of the class. Next, the application. So, application means i-apply mo sa kanila through physical. Number 4, the assessment of learning outcomes. So, the assessment of learners' outcomes, magbibigay ka sa kanila ng quiz at saka yung set work. And the lastly, assignment. Okay, assignment, it is the task given to students by their teacher to complete in a defined time. And that's all. Thank you.